Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live class. What is somatic therapy? Unwinding bodily stress with embodied processing. My name is Ryan Hassan. I'm joined today by Matt Kay, my colleague, my friend, my fellow co-creator of EP. Matt, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks, mate.
I'm struggling with the man flu, so if I have a bit of a nasally voice or I cough, please bear with me, everyone. Thank you to everyone who has let us know in the comments where you are tuning in from today. We have Trish from New South Wales, Andrew from Auckland, Claire from South Wales in the UK, Julie from San Diego, California, Lane from Montreal, Glenda from Ashley, New Zealand, Chantel from Perth. Oh God, they keep coming through. I can't keep up. Sorry, everyone. Thank you for letting us know, though, in the chat. Today, we're talking about somatic therapy. For those of you that don't know, Matt and myself have a modality that we've been teaching for years now called embodied processing, which would fall under the category of what we would say is a somatic type of therapy. And that's what we're going to run through today. It's like, what exactly is that? Some of you tuning in, maybe in the space already, you may be practitioners already, and you've done a bit of research or experienced a session yourself. Some people might have heard the term, but don't quite know what that means, and we're going to jump into that today. Matt and I, we do a pre-training for EP, which is called a somatic therapy masterclass, and a lot of people kind of get confused. They're like, so am I learning somatic therapy or embodied processing? It's like, it falls under the same category. So hopefully to give a bit more clarity today. So let's jump into it. Thank you, someone from Virginia, from NV, is that Nevada maybe? Brisbane? Fantastic. Thank you all for joining in. So what is somatic work? So basically I've put the little dictionary definition up here of the word somatic. It says it's an adjective relating to the body, especially as distinct from the mind. A little in quotes here, patients completed a questionnaire about their somatic and psychological systems. So one thing that we teach is, a lot of what we teach is very holistic. And when it comes to a human being, whether they're presenting with stress, anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, addictions, we want to include holistically all of that human being. And that means the mind, body, the environment that they're in, all of that kind of stuff. So what we do with EP, any somatic word, is we're not neglecting the mind, the psyche, and all that. We're simply including the body into this work, because one thing that, up until this point, so much therapy and everything has been very much mind-based and talk-based, which there's nothing wrong with. It can help people to a certain degree, but we're very, very passionate about teaching what is often referred to as the bottom-up approach, which is, let's get into the physiology, the nervous system, the heart, the stomach, all these places that we carry emotions and carry tension. So, Matt, anything you want to share on including the body in therapy?
We were actually having a discussion in the Facebook EP community about this morning. Someone was talking about their experience with talk therapy and how, they'd go to their therapist and, tell the story about their trauma and stress and and would come out feeling like re-traumatized, more dysregulated, more stressed. They felt the therapist was misattuned, non-empathetic, and kind of, like that. I had the same experience with many therapists. There can be a tendency to feel like it's going in circles, spinning in a sense. And that's not, not to say that talk therapy isn't helpful. Like, it can be very much helpful. And I've had practitioners, like therapists, psychologists, those kind of people who have held a very safe space, for me. And that sense of being really heard and attuned to and empathized with, and those kind of things, like that, those kind of qualities acted as an anchor for my nervous system to calm down. So the actual effectiveness of the talk therapy wasn't so much about the talking. It was actually about the state of the nervous system and the presence of the practitioner. And so, in a sense, the actual transformation or the assistance, was happening from the bottom up anyway in that kind of scenario. And, and that's not to say like somatic therapy is definitely going to be different from that, because it really depends on the state of the practitioner as well. So if a somatic practitioner is dysregulated, misattuned, non-empathetic, has all their own triggers, is overwhelmed, unable to stay present, then the somatic therapy can have the same effect and feel like it's going in circles. It's actually the resonance, the co-regulation, the relational aspect between client and practitioner that helps us to kind of transform on a nervous system level. The techniques are always secondary. And this is why in embodied processing, in our training, every practitioner is encouraged and required for certification to look at and work through a lot of their own stuff that comes up. To me, that's absolutely essential. It's very difficult to navigate someone through terrain that we've never walked ourselves, or that remains unwalked within us. And so the importance of including the body. For so long we've lived with this mind body split, and it's a kind of cognitive distortion, a dissonance between our thinking and our body. And I know, like, a lot of psychologists say, oh, we don't work with body awareness because it's not evidence-based. Evidence-based is like, the gospel, and like it's it's got a really religious kind of you're not allowed to question evidence-based and rah, rah, and but there is so much evidence for somatic approaches. There is so much evidence for it, so much science, so much neuroscience. Like, as Gabor Mate says, like, they say evidence-based, but they don't do evidence. It's all about the funding, the insurance, and all of that sort of stuff. And so, including the body, it heals that split between our mind, our psychology, and our body. And this is not a new thing. Like, this is
Not at
something
all.
that's been, known by shamans, medicine men, and yoga and spiritual kind of wisdom traditions for thousands of years, that the mind and body are one thing. I recently listened to a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki, and he was a Zen teacher, and he said the mind and body are one thing. If you're seeing them as two, then you're seeing them through a distortion. And so to actually include the body, include the felt sense of our body, it starts to bring our awareness back down into the actuality of our experience, into the present moment. And we all live so disconnected from the present moment. We're either in the past or in the future. And our body's just kind of this thing dangling, like, I imagine a jellyfish with like all those legs just dangling underneath, and we're this just head, cognizing and interpreting and reframing and thinking, incessant thinking about our experience, interpretations of kind of mental overlay of reality. And this body's just this kind of disconnected thing beneath us that actually holds our past, our memory, our stress patterns, or the way our whole body develops through our life is based on environmental stimulus, which will then govern our thinking patterns. Our thinking patterns are actually a symptom of a deeper cause, and the cause exists in the body. So, to not include the body is to not include the roots of the tree. It's kind of like we're just, trimming branches on a tree, hoping that the issue will go away, but the actual issue is stored in the roots. So when we actually include the body, we're bringing a person back to their direct experience. We're helping them to re-inhabit the fullness of who they are, because we're not just the head of the jellyfish, we're the whole being. And to include things from the bottom up, from the top down, from the inside out is the approach that embodied processing tries to take. And that's why, it's fundamentally called a somatic modality, because it includes the felt sense of our body. And everyone knows that experience, when something happens in our environment, maybe someone says a criticizing comment or something, we get that clench in the gut. That clench needs to actually be acknowledged and worked with, and complete and find resolution. We can't just think our way out of a gut clench any more than we can think our way out of a broken leg. It's like we have to actually inhabit and experience that sensation, the raw, visceral, felt sense, and experience it in order for it to metabolize and complete.
Yeah, so well said, Matt. And it's worth noting that's why it can lead to a lot of frustration when we don't include the body, because we might go and, talk with someone about certain situations in our life. So I might be having intense fear and anxiety around going into social situations. And we can sit there and talk about it and imagine scenarios and things going well or things not going well. And we can say, oh, well, look, see, we can see now there's no actual threat in those social situations. So go out there and, now you know that, experience life. But then we go, whether it's the next day or whatever, we go out to that social situation and the body just clams up again. The heart starts beating fast. Those contractions or tensions come up in the body. And then we get really frustrated because we're like, oh, I thought I'd worked this out. I mustn't be any good at doing this work, or there must be something wrong with me. And we just haven't acknowledged the roots, as Matt said. And a lot of people will go and try and work through their goals and the fact that they self-sabotage themselves. And we can have all these lofty goals of what we want for our life, but if we have imprints within the body, then and the mind, as soon as we head out there and try to achieve those goals, we'll generally hit resistance because one of those imprints will become active and we will sabotage ourselves. And once again, we'll get frustrated. We'll go, why can't I follow through and do what I say I'm going to do? And it's because we're not acknowledging what's happening in the body and what's happening in the nervous system. We're not trying to get to the roots and work out, well, when did we decide that it's not safe to have this level of happiness or this level of success? Or what event or series of events happened that would make the nervous system go into a shutdown or a freeze state as soon as I go into a social situation? And that's what we're doing in EP. We're starting to uncover the roots, understand the bodily reactions to certain scenarios, so we can then understand them and also then be there for them. And as we're talking today, we're talking a lot, I suppose, client practitioner dynamics, but you can also think about this kind of in your relationship to yourself, and holding space for yourself, and just realizing we've got a dot point here that imprints. And what we're doing in sessions, the vast majority of the time, especially in the work that we do, is we're working with imprints in the psyche and the body. And these imprints are made up of thoughts, beliefs, emotions, sensations, and images. And we'll get more into that as we go down. But that's what we're dealing with. And to not include the body in that, you're missing the biggest piece of the puzzle and will lead to this further dissonance, which is what we don't want. So the Royal Road, Matt. What is the Royal Road, by the way? You wanted to put this in there. I don't know what it means. I just found a nice picture of a road in Canberra and hoped that it looked nice.
Where is it in Canberra?
No, Canva. Canberra.
Is it a nice
I've
road?
never seen a road like that in Canberra. For those not in Australia, you won't get. That's funny. But anyway.
Well, it's just a nice quote. Like it was in Noel's article. I can't remember who said it. There was it was exactly that quote. A little bit paraphrased, maybe. The body is the royal road to transformation, and it comes back to everything we've been saying. So you can imagine like like you look around, but you see there's no threat in the moment, but my body is still responding to threat. And so our cognitive mind, our conscious mind, has the capacity to discern things like that. Okay, there's no threat. I know the past is over. I know I'm not being abused anymore. I know the relationship's over. I know I'm not a child anymore in my room, hiding under my bed, whatever it is. I can see that cognitively, but my body is still reacting as if I am. And we can't imagine that away. You can't just imagine the body away. Like, you can disconnect from it and create a kind of pseudo reality, where we're kind of dissociated from our body and imagine that we're kind of healed and over that, and it doesn't matter to me anymore. But if we really check in with my body, how is it responding in this situation, that situation? How is it responding when my partner says something that reminds me of how my dad used to talk to me, or et cetera, whatever the situation? How is our body responding? And so the body doesn't have the capacity to lie in that sense. It can't pretend that it's not feeling how it's feeling. Our mind can convince us that I'm not feeling this anymore, I'm over it, et cetera, et cetera. But
And
if
it
we're
can try and distract us as well, right?
exactly, yeah, distract us, and it will do anything to get away from some of these feelings and sensations because they can be very uncomfortable. And so the experience of changing our perspective on something cognitively versus having an embodied shift. Having an embodied shift is the royal road to transformation, because if we're having a cognitive shift in perspective, or cognitively, like, I let this go, nothing actually transforms. You could say it's just like ripples on the water. The water doesn't actually change. Just a little bit of an appearance, a reflection,
Yeah.
nothing changes in that sense, or the image in the mirror might change a bit that we're perceiving, but nothing actually changes inside in that sense. And so to have like a cognitive shift in perspective can be helpful. Like, I'm not dismissing that. It can be very much needed and helpful. Um, but to actually transform, you look at the word transform, like alchemize, to shift from one thing into another, like in the marrow of our being, it has to happen in the body. And we know this, through our own experience. Like when something's really let go, it's like say we really like have a deep grieving of something, and we cry and we feel it like releasing from our heart and our belly, and our whole body kind of is letting go and
Well, people
moving.
will say, won't they, I feel lighter. And it's like, lighter
Exactly.
of what, you know?
Yeah, the whole body feels lighter. And it's not just like, oh, I'm over that, or I've decided to let that go. No, it's a visceral, full body experience. The kind of cognitive, oh, I let this go, is dissociative in the sense it's removing attention from a big part of our experience, which is our body. And so moving down into our body is the opposite of dissociation. It's re-inhabiting, it's coming more back to what it is to be fully human, because to be fully human means to fully experience our humanity. And so it's closing the gap between our consciousness and our body until we're one kind of unified experience in the moment. And so the body is the royal road, in the sense like transformation doesn't actually happen if it's not included.
Yeah, I'll just give an example, and Matt, you've heard this, and our EP students sort of have heard this example a bunch, but it's a really great example. That's why I share it a lot. And I had this client many years ago, and this is the kind of cognitive shift versus the roading the Canberra road of
Right.
transformation. um, and basically, this client, so lovely, and we were going through and we were doing a lot of this somatic work, and she was letting me know about her life. And the topic, I noticed whenever the topic of her father came up, because what we do in a lot of somatic work is we're watching the body and watching the physiology. What's the face doing? Is there tension in the shoulders? Like, can we see the jaws clenched? We're noticing all that. And there was a lot of that going on whenever the father came up, and he had kind of left or abandoned the family when she was 4, came back into her life when she was an adult, and now was sort of had a relationship with her. They were in contact. And as soon as I asked to explore, that dynamic and that relationship, she would say, "Oh no, it's all right. I've done work on this. I wrote him a forgiveness letter about 4 years ago, so I've done it." And that's what we like to do. We like to kind of park things like, "Hey, I've done that. That's all done." And I said, "That's okay. I'm sure that the forgiveness letter was great, but I'm just noticing there's a lot of tension in the body. When he's coming up, is it okay if we just explore it? And if it's all clear, then it's all clear. We're just going to check. Little experiment." And as we started to get into that, and I won't go into a lot of the details, but there was a lot in there. There was a part of her wanting to protect and not look at it, and she had amazing amounts of anger, of sadness, of grief, and all these emotions around him. So she may have cognitively said, "I've done the forgiveness letter," but it was controlling her life to a degree, this somatic stress that she was storing around him. And then it's not easy work. We had to go through all the ways that she was angry at him, let her express that in the safety of a session, all the things she wanted to say and do and all that. Then underneath the anger was just deep levels of sadness and abandonment, and we had to work through that, and it took quite a bit of time. But that's the process of including the body and not just the mind. And after that, the reason we, in the subtitle of this class, it's unwinding bodily stress, and that's what we're doing. And some of these things will unwind in a couple of hours in a session. Some will take weeks, some will take months. We don't know, but we go in there and we're unwinding so we can release a lot of these contractions that we're holding in the body, because whether consciously or unconsciously, they are directing a lot of our life and the way we interact with the present moment.
Yeah, it's like the amount of stress we experience through our day is not necessarily related to the stress of the day, but it's like constantly having all this unprocessed anger, rage, grief, terror, whatever it is, these unmetabolized life experience held down all through the day. It's like the level of energy that unconsciously takes to keep that in and function. On top of that, it's like then we get to the end of the day and we're effed, like
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
like,
Well, we need a drink to try and calm down. We need to be on our phones to distract. And I used that word distraction before, and that's what there's so much plentiful options to distract ourselves throughout the day, and then oftentimes we turn everything off and try and go to sleep, and there's so much of that stress under the hood of the car that people have trouble sleeping. And sleep's become such a hot topic in health today, with these sleep experts being lauded and writing books and being on podcasts getting 1 million followers, because there's a collective issue with sleep, and a lot of it stems from what we're talking about here. I skipped forward a slide, we'll get back to the nervous system in a sec, but we'll just sort of, this topic of stress kind of naturally came up. And so many of us, like, stress is a good thing. Stress is a good thing when we have a good capacity within ourselves. We're able to interact with the present moment, and we're fairly well resourced, and the nervous system and the body feel safe. Then when we encounter stress, and we're always going to encounter stress as long as we're a human being, that's part of the show. We can deal with that stress, we can work through it, we can be there for it, we can be present for ourselves through whatever that stressor is. And then we come out the other side essentially a greater being, because stress helps us grow. Optimal growth, not just for human beings, but pretty much everything in nature, is the border of support and challenge. So as long as we're well supported within ourselves, when we encounter challenge, we will grow. However, most human beings on the planet, and for me, most of my life, and Matt as well, we just weren't in that place. And we have this build up of stress that builds up and builds up over years and over decades, where, that accumulated stress can turn into chronic stress. And I like the example, I use it all the time, of the backpack. Like, we're born, every time we go through a stressor and we don't have a safe resource to be able to process that, then it's like we throw a rock or a pebble into the backpack. And then we go through life, and my God, we're just loading that thing up, and then we might grow up, and maybe we do go see someone who can hold a space for us and hear us, whether a professional or a friend, and we let go of some rocks, but there's always more going in than coming out the other side. And so over time, that stress accumulation, the stress load, I guess is the term, gets so high that we start to manifest symptoms. And it has to, the body has to do that. And that symptom can be, what would be classified as a mental health disorder, or it can be physical symptoms. It can be addictions, because we're trying to do something or grab something outside of us to help soothe that stress that's happening on the inside. But our body will try and give us some sort of wake up call when that stress gets to a chronic point.
yeah, it's kind of like I use the metaphor of a jellyfish, like a jelly. Spoke about
Another
jelly.
jellyfish metaphor, two in the
Yeah,
one class. Wow. Hey.
this one's a bit different. The jellyfish kind of pulses, like stress, relax, stress, relax. And our nervous system works in the same way. If we're really attuned enough, through, and our awareness becomes refined enough, we can actually feel the pulse of our own nervous system, or the pulse of someone else's nervous system. And that stress relax, it's like a heartbeat. A heart could be another kind of way I could describe it. But that is the way the nervous system self-regulates. But the issue with us, as a collective, is we experience that stress and we get stuck. And then that stress then stores in the body. That would be accumulated stress. So ideally, our nervous system self-regulates, and the capacity for our nervous system to self-regulate depends on our childhood, our relationship with our mother's capacity to regulate her own nervous system and co-regulate with us, all sorts of things. I could speak for 20 hours on just that topic. But so that process of stress, relax, our kind of nervous system regulation patterns get set up early in life. And more often than not, we never learn to self-regulate, or we never learn to self-regulate fully. And so a lot of the time, not at all, And so then that stress gets turned into accumulated stress. And over time, we get all this stored stress, and that stress then turns into chronic stress. So we have all this stress and wounds and pain and childhood imprints stored in our nervous system, in our actual body, and our body loses the capacity to harmonize and have a kind of more jellyfish-like pulse.
Well, when I'm imagining the jellyfish, it's like, let's say it goes from this relaxed state into stress, and
Yeah,
then it doesn't come all the way out, and then
yeah,
again not all the way out, again not all the way out, and by the end of it, we're just like this little tense ball, yeah. And then that's why it can feel so amazing. And one of the analogies we use a lot in the training, it's like having that air conditioner on, but it's been on for like decades, so you actually don't know that it's on
yeah,
until
yeah.
it turns off. And so sometimes in session, when you see someone have a really big somatic release, it's like they take a deeper breath than they've taken in years, and like
Yeah.
everything, and they're like, oh my God, I knew that I was stressed, but I didn't realize how stressed I was until I felt the absence of stress. Because what I thought was the absence of stress before might have been like 10 or 20% less, or maybe if I have a few drinks, 30% less, but it wasn't complete relaxation.
Yeah. And this happens in the body, like it doesn't happen as a cognitive idea. It's not an idea or a belief. It's a visceral, physical, felt experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And so back onto the nervous system here. We won't spend too much time here. Matt and I have got a bunch of classes and videos and everything on the autonomic nervous system. But one thing we always like to talk about is that most of us human beings have a nervous system oriented around survival, because it gets adapted in a way that manifest that. So if you have a look at this diagram here of the autonomic nervous system, it's probably just worth pointing to three of these dot points. Number one, the ventral vagus. You'll see that down the bottom. This is that safety that we're talking about. This is the jellyfish. We're just rolling with the jellyfish analogies today. I love it. Just this completely relaxed jellyfish. And so it's like the absence of threat, the absence of perceived threat, a feeling of safety, the feeling of being really well resourced. I'm free to interact with the present moment in whatever way that I choose, be that just relaxing and chilling out. It might be playing, whatever it is. We can do that. The other one I'll point to is on the right-hand side, the sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight and flight arm of our nervous system. This is gearing us up ready for action. It's a very activated response to threat. That's what the nervous system's doing. It's assessing the environment for threat and then preparing the nervous system state that it deems will be best for our survival in that moment. And it's
Also,
perceived...
it's also for connection as well. And just to quickly cover, all of these can be blended,
That's right.
together. Be in ventral and sympathetic. You can be in ventral and parasympathetic. You can be in dorsal and sympathetic. You can be in dorsal and ventral. It's like it can get very complex.
It can, it can. And so we think about that fight or flight system. We've got the safety system, and the other one's the shutdown and freeze response, which is over there on the left. And so what happens with us is we go through instances in our life, generally in our developmental years, where we're put into these states of fight or flight, or this activated energy of stress, or the shutdown or freeze response, which is a real shutdown. It can also show up as fawning, so just sort of letting other people walk all over you when you're older and not stating your own needs or respecting your own needs. And so basically we grow up, and when we're not properly resourced, and we're only learning about this stuff now, a lot of people, especially that come into our training, so our parents definitely didn't know about it. And so there's a big thing with not, sort of blaming them as well. But oftentimes they didn't have the knowledge or the awareness around resourcing and the nervous system. And so we are left sort of pinging in between these states of high arousal or very low arousal, and we don't get that ventral vagus much. And so our nervous system, like the rest of our body, adapts, it changes, and over time it basically pings between those two. And it's so interesting, because Matt and I have a lived history of addiction, and we've worked with a lot of people in addictions, and it's so interesting that different people are addicted to different drugs, generally because they've been patterned to one way of their nervous system, and they're always trying to regulate it unconsciously. And so what we're always searching for as human beings is that ventral vagal state where that jellyfish can relax and we can feel completely okay in our own skin and in our own bodies. And I know this was the case for me and for many people that we've worked with. It's can be years, decades since anybody has truly felt that. So until we understand this, we can't have the awareness or start to work with these nervous system responses. And this is a lot of what we teach in EP, is that we need to be aware of, hey, when I go into this certain situation, I can notice this sympathetic response. And maybe it's an anger response as well. And then overcoupled with that, once my anger gets to a certain point, if we use a scale of 0 to 10, once it gets to about 6, then I notice now a freeze response steps in over it, because anger to that degree wasn't safe when I was a kid. And these are the imprints and the nervous system states that we work with, and we notice those, and we can start to, in a safe place where we're held by a practitioner, we can start to work through these responses and really be there for them within ourselves. Because what we do and what we see so often is we're in an adversarial relationship with ourselves. Like we feel anxiety and we're like, fuck, I don't want to feel this. I just want this to go away. Or we feel anger and we're like, oh man, there's something wrong with me. I'm angry. So we're always in opposition to what we're experiencing in the present moment, which is going to cause more resistance and more tension and take us more away from the present moment and more further away from any type of resolution. So if you want to dive into that more, just jump onto the Center for Healing website, head to the blogs, type in nervous system. You'll see blog articles, you'll see videos of me and Matt, but that's the nervous system there. And the window of tolerance is something that's a big pillar of what we talk about in embodied processing is growing in our capacity. We always imagine that there's a set of scales when somebody comes into this type of work, and that's the accumulated stress piece, which is normally pretty high up on the levels. And on the other side, it's our capacity to deal with that stress from our past, but also the stress of life on a day-to-day basis. And that capacity is normally really low. Hence why we kind of create a self-perpetuating cycle that we can't deal with the stress, don't have the capacity, so the stress keeps accumulating. And so what we're doing, we're helping people, so I had the scales this way, is to slowly digest and metabolize these stressful experiences that have happened in their past, whilst at the same time helping them grow in their own capacity to meet these experiences and meet life. And once these scales start to tip the other way, then all of a sudden the person, the human being, is able to meet life stresses. And yes, there's stressful situations. There's arguments with partners. There's awkward meetings with a boss. There's, someone rear ends you in the car. But all of a sudden we're not going to go into a massive state of overwhelm because we've dealt with those factors. So Matt, what's your view on the window of tolerance and helping that expand?
So our window of tolerance is essentially how the edge that we can meet without tipping into overwhelm or feeling like we've been flooded or are drowning in the experience. And so as we meet that edge, we essentially are building resilience in our capacity to tolerate and experience bodily stress, wounding emotions, etc. And so, as our window of tolerance grows, so does our capacity to stay embodied. And by embodied, I mean inhabiting our body, inhabiting our experience. That's essentially what we mean when we say embodied is inhabitation in our experience. And so, something will happen in our lives and it will throw us beyond our window of tolerance, beyond our capacity to meet the experience and health, like digest it in a healthy way. And when that happens, the frontal cortex of the brain gets inhibited. We move into more survival areas. Our nervous system gets overwhelmed and the experience doesn't complete. It still lives inside of us, and so we all have these. That's our definition of what trauma is. That experience that still lives within us will then limit the way we function throughout our lives. And, that's when it turns into kind of behavioral adaptations, personality adaptations, and the nervous system and person becomes oriented around survival because the body doesn't know the event's over. The experience is still happening inside on loop, like a videotape loop. And so, throughout our childhood, the more we experience these kind of adverse childhood stresses that throw us beyond our capacity, because as children we have no capacity to self-regulate, we can only do that with an adult, then our resilience to stress gets very small, because stress means overwhelm. And as our as our experience kind of evolves throughout our childhood, our personality can then adapt and orient around surviving stressful circumstance because our experience is constant stress. And so the actual coming back into the body for a lot of people who are, more on the traumatized end of the spectrum has to be a slow and titrated process, because if we just go straight in, like I use the metaphor, like a lot of trauma healing modalities, different breathwork courses, stuff like that. Like, those modalities can be great, but there's a pitfall with the way a lot of people are using them. It's like you turn the tap on, full ball, flood the sink. And it's not helpful to flood the sink, because the nervous system can't actually integrate the experience and it can potentially re-traumatize someone. And so the actual orientation is you turn it on a little bit, you develop a resiliency and capacity to meet that pressure that's there, and then you turn it off. And then you turn it on a bit more with a bit more pressure, And so you're developing, like you're climatizing, like getting into a pool. You don't want to just jump in the deep end of a freezing pool if you can't swim. You want to kind of acclimatize to it. And that way you make small sustainable shifts that last. And this is, sometimes the issue with plant medicines and that too. It throws people beyond their window of tolerance. So they'll go to a ceremony, etc., have this huge release. I don't call it a release, I call it a spew. And I know this from personal experience of, like when we are throwing ourselves beyond our window of tolerance, and we feel like we've had this belief, this big release, but then we go out into our lives, and then after a while, like everything starts to creep back in. And it's because there hasn't been that sustainable titrated shift for the nervous system to integrate. So growing in our capacity to come in, tolerate, experience in a really embodied way whilst we're in our body, developing that window of tolerance, that's what actually creates the kind of tap able to turn on and off. And eventually we can feel the sync up, and what was once completely overwhelming just becomes maybe uncomfortable over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and that's why the foundation of EP is something we call resourcing, where we're using some techniques to help someone build that inner sense of safety or just neutrality or okayness. And we can always bring people back to that point or once they start to dip into overwhelm. And if you want to read more about resourcing, then we've got classes on that as well. Just right before, jump on the blog section, centerforhealing.com, and type in resourcing, and you'll see all about that. We've spoken a bunch about imprints, but when we have these stresses in the body, then we tend to recreate a lot of those circumstances in our life. And this is why we have repeating patterns in our life. Some people have repeating patterns in relationships, they have repeating patterns when it comes to money. Most people have repeating emotions. It's like I seem to have my old friend sadness is back, or guilt, or whatever it is. We all get patterned in a different way. Because basically what happens during an imprint is something happens to us, or a series of events happen to us. Our nervous system gets imprinted. The emotion that we felt at the time is imprinted, as well as the sensations, and an image, the picture of what happened as well. And then if that's not resolved within the body, then in future, and it can be decades later, we'll encounter similar types of situation, and that imprint, or sometimes we'll call it an orphaned part, becomes active within the system, and we start to feel those emotions and those nervous system states that we felt maybe when we were 4 or 7 or 10, whatever it is, and that it jumps out and it's like, not again, not again, not again. And it's funny though, because anything in existence wants to keep living, and these imprints and beliefs want to keep happening, which is why we kind of repeat them until we unwind and do this work. And the only so if you're watching this now going, yeah man, I keep getting into a relationship with the exact type of person, it might be worth doing a bit of introspection as to why, and what's creating that. So it says here, what is unfelt becomes imprinted. That's exactly the case. And we'll know if we have an imprint, if we take ourselves back to a certain memory, normally if it's longer than about 18 months old, and we go back there and start to imagine that memory, and we start to elicit those emotions, whether it's anger or guilt or fear, whatever it is, then that means that it'll be imprinted in the body in some way. And we don't normally have, as human beings, 1, 2, or 3 of these for certain situations. We've got fucking heaps, dozens, maybe even more. And so there's always one of those imprints on the lookout for some potentially similar situation happening. So we're always on high arousal. We're always hyper vigilant. We're always looking around the corner. We can never properly relax. And so resolving these imprints is of critical importance on anyone's journey.
When something's imprinted like that, it actually stunts development. Like development gets arrested in that area. Say we've got imprints from our relational dynamic with our parents, then relationally that our development becomes arrested. And that's why we play out, the same dynamics from our childhood in our adulthood. And so actually metabolizing, resolving the imprints within ourselves, it opens up the door for further development, insight, understanding, living a life of kind of discovering who we are authentically, that these imprints were kind of veiling. How would I be in a relationship if I didn't have these unconscious dynamics that were stuck there and continuously played out in kind of cyclical patterns going around in circles, relationship after relationship, or addiction after addiction, or job after job, or whatever it is. Like, what would happen in life then? It like opens all these doors into the unknown, and then we can kind of take that curious attitude of like, oh, well, which ways am I still being hijacked by different imprints and beliefs from the past? In which ways am I still reliving the past over and over again? And so essentially working with the body and these imprints is changing the timestamp, transmuting our past into presence. And that's, to me, what it means to be fully human, to actually live rather than just, samsaric kind of repeating cycles of karma.
Yeah, I like I use the analogy of like if there's a timeline of our life and there's us now and then all back in the past, that every one of these imprints we've left a little part of our consciousness there. And so, and then that happens just over and over again. So we're kind of a little bit here in the present moment and we're dealing with life, but so much of us is caught back in the past when these things happen. And every time we go back and resolve one of these imprints, we grab a little bit of that consciousness and bring it back to now. And so ideally we have more and more capacity to be in the moment and have that consciousness focused on actually what is happening right now.
And that carrying of past experience looping within us then becomes the projection of the future. It becomes almost impossible to open up to a future beyond what is looping. We might be able to imagine it, but to actually open up to it, embody it, live it, step into it, where most of us are just caught up in these looping patterns from the past being projected into the future.
Yes.
And so then the past and the future essentially become the same thing,
It's like our mirror flipping to the other side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. We look at a mirror that way and there's a mirror that way. It's like they're just reflections of each other. And there's, in essence, there's no actuality to it. It's just past experience that's living inside of us that is veiling our true potential, that's veiling our experience of our true self, our authentic self, and veiling our experience of the potential of life. And, this comes to the next slide, like inner unification and resolution. I think that's kind of what we've alluded to the whole time with embodied transformation with the road to Canberra. It's kind of like,
Just find that road in Canberra, drive down it.
yeah.
All imprints will be resolved.
So as we find that kind of ability to inhabit our experience, to really be in the sense of I, in our authenticity, inhabiting our body, inhabiting the sensations, inhabiting the moment, really, then we become more and more unified. Where, like I don't think there's ever a point where we're 100% perfectly unified. I think it's kind of like evolution where it's constantly unifying and refining itself. There's never a point evolution says, I'm fully evolved, done. It will find another way to refine itself. And, so we align with that intelligence. And over time, as we learn and develop the capacity to stay present in our experience and develop the skills, the inner resources and supports to be able to actually metabolize things as they happen, the sense of being whole. I'm not into perfect, like the word perfect. Where as humans we are inherently imperfect. You could say we're perfectly imperfect, but wholeness, perfect is a completely unrealistic idea. It's like, as Adyashanti, Zen teacher, he would say, to expect perfection from ourselves or another human beings is an act of cruelty, because
Yeah,
it's
it's
impossible.
so many people's,
Yeah,
goal, to achieve
no such
perfection.
thing. There is no such thing, but wholeness, the experience of wholeness, of unification, of experiencing ourselves as whole. Yet we all have light and we all have dark, we all have wounds, and we all have, the ability to heal from those wounds. We all have the ability to be whole, to return to our wholeness. And to me, wholeness means we inhabit the whole of our experience.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said, beautifully said. And so, it says here, no conflict between the parts within us. And we haven't spoken a hell of a lot about parts today, but we are made up of many parts. And when we have that inner conflict, that's what's going on. And I'm sure everybody watching has had that experience where in the mind we're having an argument with ourselves, but it's kind of two different parts who are just having a discussion, who have different ideas of what is best for us, the human being. I spoke about self-sabotage at the start. Like, what's that? That is maybe our conscious will, our hopes, our desires, our dreams, saying, hey, I want that out of my life. I want that experience to have. And then all of a sudden, when we pursue it, one of these imprints becomes active and said, no, it's not safe to go and do that. And so now I'm in conflict between my parts. And so it's so beautiful when once we resolve one of those particular imprints, then all of a sudden there's no conflict there. We are free to pursue those goals, and then we'll meet resistance in some form, but at least it's not going to be from that imprint. And then also no conflict between our parts and the moment in front of us, which is really what Matt was talking about, which is like, I can be in the moment right now. I can take that moment in without getting myself so incredibly stimulated and disturbed by what's going on. And that's a process that takes time. It's like the perfection thing again. It's like we start becoming aware of this work and maybe seeing a therapist or, doing a bunch of classes and joining groups. And then all of a sudden we have all this resistance and emotions to an event that's happening. Like, I'm meant to be fine with everything. It's like, no, that's not how it
No,
works. Please let
kind of,
yourself be human.
all parts are welcome. So even the activation, even the uncomfortability is a part of the unification. We can learn over time to develop the capacity to step into that, to step into the imperfection, to the fact that sometimes we will get overwhelmed, to the fact that sometimes we will get frustrated and angry and upset and grieving. It's like, none of that needs to be oppressed. Like, we can actually, to step into authenticity means to include the things that we want to go away, and that's where it's like embracing our imperfection. And that's where alchemy and transformation happens, when things are included. It's like, it's okay that we have problems. Like, I still have problems, I fuck up daily. But the ability to include those and be okay with that, that's what it means to embrace the human experience, and to do that whilst inhabiting the visceral felt sense of our experience as it unfolds. That's, to me, it's all included in the wholeness then.
Yeah, and this is the orientation that we teach our students. It's all is welcome here. So all parts of you are welcome here. And I'm not here to fix you. You're not broken. And so that's what we're teaching in the relationship of a practitioner and client. But I encourage everybody watching today to try and take that orientation with yourself for the rest of today. All parts of me are welcome here. I'm not broken. I'm having different experiences, but all of me is welcome here. And so embodied processing is the modality that we teach. We love talking about this stuff. It's our purpose, our mission. EP has grown to now, I think, 1,000 students all over the globe. Right now, we have a 50% off sale. We only do this a couple of times a year. If it resonates in any way, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Hopefully it works from this. If not, can one of the team put it in there? But if you just search embodied processing, put it in Google, it'll pop right up. We have an hour and a half long pre-training, and there's all the information that you can check out there. Like I said, 50% off at the minute. It's never going to be a lower price than this, so feel free to check that out. And for everybody that is tuned in live, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. I've loved all the interaction in the chat here. Thank you for everyone who shared. Beck, I'm sorry it was glitching. The replay will be up on the feeds of the Center for Healing business page and also the Trauma Informed Education group, whichever one you're watching in now. This will also go up as a blog on our website probably by the end of the day, so feel free to catch the replay there. A big thank you to everybody tuning in, and Matt, as always, absolute pleasure.
Thanks, mate. See you, everyone.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.